Timor Leste was actually very fortunate in '99 because we had the full support of the international community in many spectrums. Because our country was devastated in 1999 after the referendum ballot, no infrastructure, no human capacity to be found, no laws existing, that we had to literally build everything from scratch. So we drew on that international support, the Bretton Woods institutions, namely the UN and the IMF and the World Bank and the ADB, all participated in this process in a coordinated sort of fashion, together with a lot of bilateral donors, to come together and to provide us with the guidance that we needed to set up a transitional administration, and from there to go through a political process where we could write our own constitution and enact it in order for us to be an independent state. That assistance was vital in bringing in the participation of the people. Having international actors come in enabled politicians not to exclusively do it on our own. It made independent institutions, such as the Bretton Woods, have to also ask for the involvement and participation of civic society, of women groups, of youth, of church organizations, and the general community of Timor-Leste. So it ended up being an initial process of participatory democracy, which is very hard to get in the early stages of a post-dictatorship, post-resistance type system that we had in any country, and in Timor-Leste that was also the case. The assistance that we got was basically technical assistance. We got advice in terms of what needed to be included. The social, economic, cultural rights, for example, was very much as a result of the United Nations work in Timor-Leste at the time. Then there were the economic issues, and the IMF and the World Bank were involved. In hindsight, I do wish that we had taken more of their advice in order to ensure that these institutions today function better than what they are currently functioning. And we also had friends of East Timor, like Norway, who assisted us in establishing a petroleum fund, making sure that our constitutional framework guaranteed the provisions to create reserves from this wealth that we had. It enabled us to also ensure that the petroleum wealth would be equitably distributed, and it had to be then channeled through one account, the petroleum fund account, that would then be drawn in order for us in amounts that were sustainable, so that then we wouldn't have the famous Dutch disease that many countries that have oil-producing capacity have. It has been an ongoing process. Just the Constitution alone is insufficient. We have since independence ratified many international conventions, and a great idea that came from the international community as well was to include that our Constitution would automatically have a reception clause in there for international conventions, which meant that anything on the human rights front that would guarantee the implementation of the rule of law, international treaties, all those good things that the international community has been working in the various international forums would be integrated into our national laws immediately. We don't have to wait until a law is drafted. It requires that when a law is drafted, our Constitution demands that we comply with those international conventions. That is very important for a nation democracy, still trying to come out and defend human rights principles and build an economic base that is sustainable for the future. In terms of getting international assistance, one is always weary, of course, that some of this advice may interfere with our own sovereign right to determine our destiny and the path that we wish to follow and our cultural values. It's important that that is a factor that we can trust will be kept to the Timorese institutions, political institutions that are legitimized by the people. So in doing so, we are also conscious of the fact that just having political legitimacy is not enough. We need to have sound policies in order to deliver the state's obligations to the people in terms of service delivery, in terms of respect for human rights, in terms of protecting people's rights and needs for basic services and infrastructure, and in terms of also becoming a responsible international actor in the world economy, particularly now because it's a globalized world. To get that assistance right, we need international players that understand comparative constitutional building processes, can bring to us experiences from around the world on what has worked and what has not, and to bring us together to the table. Post-conflict countries, although we are for one country, one national identity, sometimes it is very difficult to speak to each other and to put on the table the issues and find compromise. International institutions can bring technical options to the table that then depoliticizes the process to an extent that then decisions can be made that are good for the people. They bring over independent perspectives that politicians sometimes don't think about because we may be preoccupied about our power structure and how we are going to stay in power. Having these institutions also means that a lot of research has gone into what we are about to put in a constitution. Let us not forget that a constitution is not a document that you'd want to change every year. You want to have that as a framework in which the country can build upon. Nation building requires stability in the constitution as well, in order for positive results and outcomes to come out. So international actors can also deliver in terms of varied approaches. Sometimes the end result is not the be end and the be all in a political process. It is more acceptable to people in the country if the process involved many stakeholders and as many of the community as possible. Why is that important? Because an inclusive process would result in acceptance of the rules and also make it a non-confrontational instrument that the state can use for everyone in our society. So it's very important for that participation process, and I think going forward as we developing more important conventions, international conventions, which world is demanding that they be implemented, particularly with climate change having such a big impact now, with corruption being such a big dilemma for many states and regimes, that these institutions are able to come in and provide a basic roadmap in which to rectify some of the basic issues that we have that are not happening in the state itself, that need to be rectified in order for the people in that country to embrace that they are being governed well. Until we have that process, many countries that are living in poverty will always feel that they are not benefiting. And it used to be all right because people were closed off from the world. A lot of people, a lot of leaders got away with it. In today's world, with today's communication and globalization, it is virtually now impossible to cover up that these human rights principles, conventions exist, and that they should be adopted and implemented in the country as well. So people are now demanding their rights. They don't want a corrupt government. They want the distribution of their resources in an equitable manner. They want social justice. They want the rule of law to be implemented. They want the human rights protected. Those kind of insistence demands that we're seeing throughout the world at the moment, and particularly in Africa at the moment and the Middle East, is indicative of the change in the global political affairs. But I think it's important that we attempt to address, to help these countries overcome as quickly as possible, so that then the world can move forward.